government vessels are making more intrusions into Japan's territorial borders around the Senkaku Islands. Second, the Chinese military is much more active, not only in the South China Sea, but also other borders around Japan. This is a chart about the number of intrusions by Chinese government ships into Japan's territorial waters in the Senkaku Islands. So, this is about this year, 2019, the number of intrusions. So, in comparison to previous years, the numbers are rising. So actually, the intrusion by Chinese government ships in the former half of this year, 2019, have already outnumbered last year's intrusions in total. Afterwards, so far, from July to October, quite regular intrusions are happening, like 3 or 4 times per month. Furthermore, our Chinese ships are sailing in the contiguous zone outside the Territorial Sea of the Senkaku Islands quite regularly and more continuously. With regard to the military activities, our China's military is quite active in the East China Sea. In the sea, Chinese air power has been growing active too. This is a chart about the number of scuffles conducted by the Japan's air self-defense force against the Chinese aircraft. So the general trend is that the numbers grow. And also, a picture is cited here from the MOD website. This is the air and navy submarine that entered Japan's contiguous zone around the Senkaku Islands, which ended in January 2018. So this is a picture made by the Ministry of Defense about the Japan's perception of China's military activities surrounding Japan. So this shows that the China's military is very active, not only in the South China Sea, but also in other waters surrounding Japan, as well as surrounding China, of course. So in this picture, from Japanese perspective, the East China Sea is connected to the South China Sea in terms of China's military expansion. So how to deal with the sort of China's assertiveness in the East China Sea, as well as in the South China Sea. In addition to the enhancing our own defense capabilities, mainly of the self-defense forces and the Coast Guard, and the strengthening cooperation based on the alliance with the United States, we are seeking cooperation with partners. Actually, in order to address the half of China, to address the maritime security in the sea, Japan emphasizes the importance of securing freedom navigation based on rule of law. And with regard to the rule of law at sea, Japan asserts 3 principles. First, states shall clarify their sovereign claims based on international law. Second, states shall not use force or coerce others by force in enforcing their claims. And third, our states shall settle disputes by peaceful means. The notion of rule of law is embedded in Japan's 2 vision documents, like the Free and Open Indo-Pacific and the Asia region. I would like to introduce the documents to you. First, the Free and Open Indo-Pacific vision is aiming at developing a free and open Indo-Pacific as international public goods. One of the 3 pillars of the vision is promotion and establishment of the rule of law, and freedom navigation. This is to maintain the fundamental principles of international order, which enable peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. Another pillar of the free and open Indo-Pacific is commitment to peace and stability, including capacity building in maritime law enforcement agencies and maritime domain awareness. And the second document is the Vientiane Vision. Vientiane Vision is a guideline for Japan-ASEAN Defense Cooperation. The vision aims at consolidating the regional maritime order in line with the principles of international law. Based on the Vientiane Vision, currently the Japanese Ministry of Defense are conducting a lot of projects, mainly to the ASEAN countries, in terms of enhancing their coastal defense capabilities and heightening their maritime domain awareness. Not only by supporting equipment, but also by supporting software like by conducting seminars about international law or other things. So this picture is about the ship ladder program, inviting all the 10 ASEAN countries to board on a vessel of the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. Finally, in connection with the East China Sea, addressing the East China Sea, I'd like to mention Japan's approach to the South China Sea. So the dimension contains two multilateral and bilateral approaches. Actually, Japan is quite active in participating in the ASEAN dialogues. Despite not being a claimant of sovereignty in the South China Sea, Japan identified itself as a stakeholder in the South China Sea. And in the multilateral arenas, Japan is trying to multilateralize and internationalize the South China Sea consistently. Like in the East Asia Summit that has been just held in August 2019, Foreign Minister Kono stressed the importance of upholding the rule of law on every sea, including East and South China Seas, and stated that Japan shares with East Asia Summit participating countries a serious concern over the worsening situation in East and South China Seas. And also Japan consistently stresses the importance of upholding the arbitral ruling which was issued in 2016 about the South China Sea. And also taking advantage of multilateral venues, Japan again repeatedly claims the importance of the rule of law to govern the regional maritime order. This is to spread awareness regarding the importance of the rule of law over participating countries, including ASEAN members. And but with regard to bilateral support to ASEAN countries, there are a lot of many items, like Japan is providing part of vessels with some of the ASEAN countries, like the Philippines and Vietnam. And to almost all the ASEAN countries, Japan is quite active in conducting capacity building assistance projects. This kind of projects cover a lot of fields, not only including the maritime safety, but also the HADR and also the alien safety. There are many. And also, Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force is making strategic protocols to the coastal countries in Southeast Asia of the South China Sea, like Vietnam and the Philippines. And also, bilateral, trilateral, quadrilateral exercises are conducted as well between Japan, one of the ASEAN countries, and our partners and allies, like the combination is about like among the Japan, the United States, the Philippines, and Australia, and also sometimes the Japan, the United States, and India. So all these measures are aiming at promoting this sort of consciousness and awareness of the
Thank you very much. That was well timed. It was the old limits, not the new, so you can move on. Yes, you'd like to use the podium.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Navy Captain Sukjoon Yoon. I'm a senior research fellow of the Korea Institute for Military Affairs, which is one of the stakeholders to support our Ministry of National Defense. The KAIMA, the Korea Institute for Military Affairs, mainly focus on operational and tactical issues. And I'm so honored to be here to deliver my paper entitled the East China Sea issues, especially focused on the intractable strategic competition between the United States and China, and add on some South Koreans' perspective as they organize the order need to do so. First of all, I would like to discuss the new development of Northeast Asia security environment, because the East China Sea right between the Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia, and the security environment of Northeast Asia is changed rapidly, and there are presumably 6 or 5 chain developments. The first, China wanted to be a true maritime power with supporting continental potence. China is a huge landscape country, which is unlikely the United Kingdom and Japan. These two countries are island nations. So lack of resources to extend their maritime power to operate beyond their limitation. So China has great potential to be maritime power. That is the one of the important development in Northeast Asia. Second, diplomacy has eclipsed by the military consideration, with the East China Sea now on the front line of the strategic competition between the United States and China. Throughout the intractable concept of so-called Indo-Pacific rather than Asia-Pacific. The third, some maritime dispute in East China Sea and the South China Sea, which has been primarily rhetoric and legal, has been demilitarized. The most conspicuous of such issues, the freedom of navigation operation conducted in the South China Sea by the United States Navy, and lately also by the navies of Canada, Australia, France, and United Kingdom, presumably India. The People's Liberation Army Navy has reacted vigorously to these operations, resulting in several near collisions between surface combatant vessels, also to contingent encounters between the aircraft. Fourth, the perspective of regional nuclear proliferation is now very dear. There is often discussions about the acquisition of nuclear weapons by South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. The latter seeking to restrain the threat from China and others, planning their last resort to deter North Korea's nuclear missiles. Lastly, alliance prevailing in the Northeast Asia were previously understood as a mutual fact to ensure national and regional peace and stability. But the marginal influence of US President Donald Trump's America First policy has shifted the alliance concept to become more largely transactional. South Korea, Australia, and probably India have all begun to emphasize their specific national interests rather than neutral interests. And now I would like to address some long-standing issues in East China Sea. Due to geographical complexity, there are several long-standing issues, including the East China Sea. The limitation of maritime zones, including 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone, defining the continental shelf under the East China Sea, and the connections between the Northeast and Southeast, and to the West Sea and South Sea of the Korea Peninsula, as well as Japan Peninsula. The legal and political disputes over the uninhabited Diaoyutai, Senkaku Island. Each of these issues are fairly intractable, with entrenched position based on their politics and economics. And none of these issues is likely to be resolved through negotiation in any time soon. These are the long-standing issues involving in the East China Sea are popularly termed gray zone conflict or Crown zone conflict. As the disputed island, such as the Senkaku Diaoyutai Island, legal discussion has been superseded by military posturing. Naval vessels, military aircraft, coastal guard vessels from China and Japan have all entered the disputed areas and seeking to legitimize their respective claims. Since China imposed on East China Sea Air Defense Identification Zone, CADIS, in 2013, dangerous confrontation in the air and sea have increased dramatically. Typically from wild fishing or survey vessels are being escorted. According to the Japanese 2019 defense white paper published in September 27th this year, there were 29 maritime encounters and 681 the air encounters during the 2018. The situation has been exacerbated by the opacity of rule of engagement and the stand operation procedures. Now I would like to discuss what is the new challenges in the East China Sea in terms of acceleration of strategic competition between the United States and China. First, legal and historical East China Sea disputes between China and Japan cannot be considered as limited to bilateral issues, since they determine their regional balance of military power. Any solution would be facilitated or frustrated encirclement of one rivalry by the others. Of course, this affect China and Japan, but would also be important for other countries. Second, confrontation in East China Sea are no longer limited to gray zone conflict. Many hypothetical scenarios which could lead to outright war, have now become significantly more conceivable. China might seize the Senkaku Island. The third party could then intervene, such as the United States. China might seek to establish control of the sea around the Korea Peninsula. China might blockade Taiwan to pursue its national integration. China might behave more great violence toward ASEAN countries in the conquest of the South China Sea. Third, China's Belt and Road Initiative in the name of maritime circular concept is important new factors. It is intended to extend China's naval and maritime influence across the wide region. So, East China Sea is essential for another springboard to support that ambition. Smaller and weak nations are thus entangled in the China-US strategic competition since they are the target of the BRI and also of the US Indo-Pacific strategy, meant to encounter Chinese expansionism. Fourth, East China Sea is the heart of China's regional and global maritime vision for the energy and food security. China's economy to be set by the trade war with the United States and apparently felt there are fresh regions for China's leaders to step up more dramatic step. So these new challenges to security of the East China Sea must be understood in terms of regional and global geopolitical situation. And due to time constraint, I skipped South Koreans' concern about these old issues and new challenges. Now I would like to suggest some recommendations to resolve these intractable and inexorable issues. First, for the United States. US President Donald Trump, America First isolationism is clearly undermining countries' long-term interests. Somehow, the United States needed to return to form as a reliable ally pursuing a coherent strategic approach in dealing with China in the East China Sea and South China Sea and elsewhere. Failing this, there would be the cost, even the terrible consequences. For China, unless its leaders are willing to countenance full-scale war with the United States, then they should backpedal somewhat on their ambitions to displace the United States as the regional hegemony. China's security interests would be better served by the accepting that there are other parties with a legitimate interest in the East China Sea. If China treated the East China Sea simply as a component of China's first island chain, then it is asking for trouble. As China expanded its strategic visions from the economic to the geopolitical consideration, it should pay more attention to cooperate active defense beyond the East China Sea to the second island chain, should seek to more promote peace and prosperity through the mutual interest of all regional stakeholders. For the South Korea and Japan, unfortunately, we stick too much on the domestic politics. Domestic politics has too often intervened each other's foreign policy, taking a responsible stance in the region. Recently, both countries attempted to use the US-China strategic competition to leverage their influence over the Northeast Asia. They should come clear about the past. This would enhance security of East China Sea and the whole the region. For the other interesting parties around the region, such as Taiwan, Philippines, and presumably some of Asian countries, such as Vietnam, their economies depend upon a peaceful, secure East China Sea. They are interested by stance in dispute of East China Sea, and they should continue to balance their relations with China, which is striving to dominate whole of the East Asia, strategically and militarily, against their relations with the United States, which still offer to important protection against such Chinese ambitions. These weak nations should continue to avoid leaning too obviously toward one or other of the regional superpowers. So, nuanced diplomacy would serve them best over the long term. Lastly, East China Sea should not be militarized by anybody. China has already militarized the South China Sea by building artificial islands, then they installed anti-defense weapons and systems, and deployed long-range aircraft and the naval combatant vessels around them. The reality of transforming uninhabited soils and deeps into artificial islands in this way is very dubious under the United Nations Convention Law of the Sea. However, the historical background of legal status of East China Sea are distinct from that of the South China Sea. And in the East China Sea, it could be feasible for all stakeholders to agree to define buffer zone or safe zone to avoid unintended military crisis or crisis. South Korea has plenty of its own problems to deal with and would much prefer China to scale down or at least pause the implementation of its grandiose ambitions. South Korea is also deeply disappointed by how crack the United States has become under the President Trump. The East China Sea is connected with the Yellow Sea, the Sea of Japan is known as East Sea in South Korea, and through the South China Sea to the Indian Ocean, Arctic Ocean, including Atlantic Ocean, and the South Pacific. The stability of East China Sea is used vital for the peace and prosperity in many other countries, which are also impacted by strategic competition between two regional superpowers. Due to time constraint, I better stop here. Thank you for your attention.
Conference. While we are paying attention to and discussing the recent developments in the South China Sea, we should not forget about the potential conflicts in the East China Sea and the possibility of rising tensions in that area, which could affect peace and stability in the region. May I help you? The theme for this roundtable is contexts in the East China Sea. So my paper will focus on maritime disputes in the East China Sea. So there are a number of disputes, territorial sovereignty disputes between and among the three parties, maritime boundary, and method of drawing the baseline on which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured, and the last one, legal status of maritime features. But this issue, in my opinion, not yet arise. But Okinawa Torishima issue has become a dispute between Japan, South Korea, and the PRC. So this is just for you to take a look at the territorial disputes in the East China Sea. Actually, there are 8 maritime features. That will come to the question I raised, the legal status of these maritime features. Are they islands or rocks? For Rambo, the last topic in Chinese, the Fei Jiao, the last one, 0.0008 km square kilometers. It's either rock or an island. But you consider that with the other, we can discuss a lot later. But anyway, my point is, there are other maritime disputes, continental shelf limits. And you can see the line that the white line, that's the outer limit claimed by South Korea. And the other one, the red one, that by China. Then the legal status, as I just mentioned, that Okinawa Torishima. Tokto is the rock or an island. Maybe the Baker Island or Kinmen Reef, that's the several maritime features within the US Pacific remote island. Are they islands or rock? Are they full-fledged island can generate 200 nautical miles or not? And this is a straight baseline claim by Beijing, of course challenged by the US State Department. So then we move to the maritime boundary disputes. In the East China Sea, China, Japan, Taiwan claimed 200 nautical mile easy, and of course continental shelf. Japan's position, we know that there's no dispute over territorial sovereignty over the 8 maritime features. But we have to note that Japan admits that there exists a maritime dispute with regard to the delimitation of the continental shelf in the East China Sea. You can see the document from the UN, especially the Commission, CLCS. And this is also true regarding the dispute over the delimitation of the EEZ, as we heard from Capt. So Japan proposed to use the median line to draw maritime boundaries in the East China Sea, which is rejected by PRC. So they see that this line in the middle, that's the median line claimed by the Japanese government, which is rejected by the PRC government. And we see those oil drilling activities in the overlapping or disputed area in this East China Sea. And that's trigger disputes and escalation in the region. I will talk about that later. So come to the Law Sea Convention. We look at the obligation on the Article 74 and 83, that's regarding to delimitation of maritime boundary. The important thing is that you have to delimit the boundary for the purpose of achieving an equitable solution. And paragraph 3 of the Article 74 and 83 as well. Pending agreement, the state concerned should not take or conduct drilling activities that could jeopardize or hamper the reaching of the final delimitation agreement. So that is one of the disputes between Japan and PRC regarding delimitation. So that's ongoing dispute. I will talk about that later. So, beginning in October 2004, the dispute led to 11-round meeting between the two parties, negotiation, and there are 2 summits. So in June 2008, the 2 parties reached a so-called principal consensus. From the Japanese side will be 2008 agreement. Is it an agreement or is it a principal consensus? So that's subject to further discussion. But in any case, this is an important one, that the 2 parties agreed to establish a joint development zone. You can see that the yellow one, the small one, the larger one will be the zone between Japan and South Korea, but it has never been implemented. But anyway, so no matter what, a good example of that joint, of the 2008 agreement or principal consensus, this is the one we are looking forward for in the future. Taiwan-Japan Fisheries Agreement. Taiwan and Japan have disputed overlapping exclusive economic zone, also sovereignty disputes over DIG. When I say DIG, the Yaoitai Island Group and Senkaku Island. But anyway, this is a provisional arrangement, very important. So is it possible for PRC and Japan to reach a joint development agreement following the 2008 principal consensus? That's very important, we have to think about that. So the position of the 2 parties, Japan insists on the use of median line for delimitation, we know that. But Beijing argued that the unique feature of East China Sea, such as the natural prolongation of continental shelf and the contrasting geographic formulation of continent and island, should be taken into account for the delimitation. And Japan argued that the Chinese claim and position is baseless under the current international law. And this is a number of the most recent statements by the Japanese side and Chinese side. The Japanese government say that strongly requests PRC to cease its unilateral development in East China Sea and to resume negotiation as soon as possible on the implementation of the 2008 agreement. And from the Chinese side, Beijing does not recognize the so-called median line unilaterally claimed by Japan, nor Japan's position of delimiting the East China Sea on the basis of so-called median line. So Beijing argued that the Japan proposed the median line is just a unilateral claim, and PRC firmly opposes it and never acknowledges it. So those are the official position of the 2 sides. But since 2015, we see a number of unilateral oil drilling activities conducted by PRC, and that triggered further escalation in addition to the previous speaker talking about the Senkaku Island, Yaoitai Island, and the patrolling and so on. But we see increasing number of protests from Japan. But good news is we have been seeing positive development in the PRC-Japan relations regarding East China Sea issues, right? In 2016, they began to talk about the 2008 principal consensus and the need to promote maritime cooperation in that semi-enclosed sea. And then during the 11th round meeting of the PRC-Japan high-level consultation on maritime affairs, both sides confirmed, I emphasize, confirmed to adhere to the principle and the consensus made in June 2008 concerning the East China Sea issue. And agree to further strengthen communication and exchange. So this is the 12th round of PRC China high-level consultation on maritime affairs. I'm looking forward to see some progress made at 12th round meeting of the Japan PRC high-level consultation on maritime affairs, especially regarding the implementation of the 2008 principle, the consensus. But it's coming, and maybe this month or next month, we are going to see that consultation meeting be held in mainland China. So one thing is very important is I want to compare the East China Sea and South China Sea. In the South China Sea, all parties reiterate the need to make the sea into a peace, stability, prosperity, from Chinese side with peace, cooperation, and friendship. Similarly, in the East China Sea, both Chinese side and Japanese side also make a commitment. So that's very important. But right now, are we going to see that possibility to occur? So this is the 2006, actually here in Hanoi. At that time, the Prime Minister Abe and the Chinese President Hu Jintao, again, they want to speed up consultation on the East China Sea issue, and they want to make the East China Sea the sea of peace, cooperation, and friendship. I don't want to repeat because I just mentioned that this is the most recent development, especially in June. The previous speaker mentioned that the meeting between President Xi and Prime Minister Abe in Osaka, very important for this remark statement here. And there will be no genuine improvement in the Sino-Japanese relations without stability in the East China Sea. So this is the duty to cooperate under the UN Charter and under Article 279 of the UNCLOS. I don't want to repeat because I believe all of you know this very well. So but key point is provisional arrangement is very important. This is my last two slides. Under UN Charter or Article 279 UNCLOS, you should take a number of action to settle the dispute by negotiation, inquiry, mediation, conciliation, and we know that. And there are other bilateral or regional code of conduct. We are seeing the development regarding code of conduct in South China Sea. Are we going to see a code of conduct in the East China Sea? And provisional arrangement, now we see that between Taiwan and Japan. And the 2008 agreement, China PRC does not consider it agreement, but principle consensus. And what about joint political statement? A lot. And actually, this is based upon 4 important basic documents. That's in addition to other statements. The 1972 Japan-China joint statement, 1978 Japan PRC Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1998 Japan PRC Joint Declaration, and 2008 Japan PRC Common Strategic Interests Joint Statement. So those are the important political statements are there. And then Joint Development Agreement forthcoming. Last one, Peace Initiative. We know that Korea, you have that kind of Northeast Peace Initiative proposed, initiative. Taiwan have East China Sea Peace Initiative. And both Japan and PRC have that, making the East China Sea into a peace, cooperation and friendship, peace initiative. So this is the last one. Because my time is kind of limited, I don't know how many minutes. Okay, thank you. So context in the East China Sea, possible way out. Last roundtable, we talked about one gentleman asked the possibility to go to ICJ or court or tribunal to settle the disputes, which will be the legal approach. Now, if we look at the South China Sea, the dispute between PRC and Vietnam regarding the Hayangdi's number 8, the oil and gas exploration activities dispute. So legal approach is not possible for Japan and PRC to consider this, especially regarding obligation under Article 74, paragraph 3. That is not to conduct unilateral activities before reaching the final delimitation agreement, which means PRC should start to conduct that unilateral activities. But legally speaking, is Beijing allowed to do that? But according to international law and some study, yes, they are allowed to do that because the activities are conducted in the western side of the median line, Japanese median line, and about 5 kilometers away. But anyway, that's from the Japanese side. Is it possible to submit that to a competent court or tribunal to settle disputes? Now, in July 2007, Japan submitted its disputes with Russia over fishing vessel being arrested in the Russian exclusive economic zone. Japan
fall under the limit of Article 298, and there are two ways to approach it. If you consider it as a question of delimitation, then it may fall under the limit of the declaration in 2006. But if we look at it as a pre-delimitation, since it is the obligation pending final agreement, which means that this is a stage taken place before delimitation, then the arbitration may have jurisdiction over that issue. And finally, I may add some point to the position of Japan. As far as I know, Japan has given a consent in general for the jurisdiction of the ICJ. So is it true that if China, if PRC is willing to bring a case over the sovereignty of the island before the court, then Japan will go before it?
You mean the East China Sea? Oh, never.
Quickly, please.
Oh, never. I will read necessarily the Japan's official position about the sovereignty over the Sinica Islands. So, again, they are indisputably inherent part of the territory of Japan in light of historical facts and based upon international law. So that's our position.
Thank you very much. Before asking for the customary applause for our good panelists, just a couple of quick observations from the chair. We've heard some disputes here between our friends and allies in Korea and Japan. All of us come from and with families, and we know there's nothing sadder than disputes within the family, particularly including the family of nations, free and democratic nations. And in those circumstances, I've always found it useful to try and tone down the emotionalism and avoid actions being taken that are in fact disadvantageous to not only your own country, but the whole family. Secondly, I couldn't resist Professor Beckman's comment about the Taiwan Strait. 48 years ago this summer, I made the last U.S. Navy patrol down the Taiwan Strait. For 20 years, we had done Taiwan Strait patrols. And we didn't know it at the time, but Kissinger was on his way into Beijing to set up a few things that changed history. Then we did that one, and that was it. Suddenly, they stopped. Would you please join me in giving a hand to our good panelists? Thank you very much, and the session's concluded.